You want me to review the new Earl Sweatshirt album? Wow. A couple months ago, I didn't think you guys wanted me to touch rap ever again. Then I take a stab in the dark and decide I want to talk about the new Kendrick Lamar because I really, really loved his first album, and now I'm getting requests out the ass. Pretty cool. I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside by Earl Sweatshirt. This is an album that's gotten a lot of mystique and a lot of hype behind it. This has gotten some attention, not only because of its early release, but we'll talk about that in a moment, but also because of its content, which is really meant to portray a lot of antisocial sentiments. So this was one that really buzzed on many different levels and was considered to be quite haunting based around its first single, which is a song entitled Grief. And to mention Grief briefly, this is a song that sort of feels like you're trapped in the middle of a psychological horror video game. And the music video actually kind of goes along with this, considering you seem to be in this strange world of minimalism, and you kind of see the exploits of the characters through the same dimensional spyglass as you would see in perhaps one of these such games, perhaps of an indie persuasion game, either that or I could even go so far as a minimalist version of, say, a Silent Hill. But either way, we have to talk about the release of this disc, considering the physical copy of it's not meant to drop until the middle of April. But this has already been released through iTunes. If you really want to know why physical media is dying, there's one of the reasons. These mistakes that keep happening, these ways in which, record labels and executives have been accidentally leaking things, whether it be to iTunes or to Spotify, whatever it may be, that have been causing a lot of antics. It's definitely something that's given fans a lot of excitement, considering they get what they want a little bit earlier. But whenever it comes to the physical media, it does nothing but make it suffer. But let's stop talking about that and get into the actual album itself. It's a short one. Now, this isn't to say that Doris, which was Earl Sweatshirt's major label debut, was all that much longer. It was 44 minutes as opposed to this album's runtime of about 30 or so. And the 10-track run is kind of a short one for a rap album. Usually whenever you see a rap album, you almost expect there to be anywhere between 15 to 18 tracks on it. But this is definitely not your ordinary rap star. This is not your ordinary buzzworthy artist. This is one that really, as evidenced by his time in Odd Future and kind of the way that his own solo career has kind of progressed, has definitely found a niche in kind of just forging his own path whenever it comes to hip-hop. Some people will call it alternative hip-hop, some people will call it weird hip-hop, some people will call it dark hip-hop. I'm really not one to care too much about distinction. That's something that I have to actually care about whenever it comes to my metal reviews, because people won't shut the fuck up about it. But whenever it comes to hip-hop, to me, there's definitely a lot of niches and facets and branches of this path, but definitely one where hip-hop to me is still hip-hop. But at any rate, this is an album that certainly showcases that dark theme and kind of really an artist that feels like he's got musical influences that span a wide variety of sources. Now, he does a lot of production work on this album under a pseudonym, but at the same time, you can definitely tell that these were not pre-generated or predisposed ideas that were given to him or created for him by somebody else. There's definitely that feel of attachment and that feel of the work being complete whenever you listen to each of the tracks off of this album. Even the portions of it that don't seem to make a lot of cohesive sense do once Earl decides to take the mic and really starts to put some lyrical, some lyrical sense and spin some lyrical truth onto the, at times, very disheveled musical narrative that you hear in the background. And actually, that's what sort of helps to fit the bill. It kind of helps to fit the overall theme of the disc of antisocialism, of isolation, of basically almost misanthropy. Not really enjoying the things that are on the outside world, not really enjoying people. Kind of what would happen if you got yourself deep into a funk or a depression, either that or just decided one day that there's way too much that goes on in the outside world that just aims to hurt and harm. But this is an album that can by itself really paint this picture very vividly, and it can actually be seen as these ideas throughout the mental status of some individuals. And it's almost like putting all of those mental pictures into song and creating something from it. And the creation is certainly interesting. Mantra, the second track on the album, is the first real heavyweight as far as I'm concerned. The introduction is definitely fantastic to set this up. However, Mantra itself is a strong indication of what Earl is able to do from a flow standpoint. He's got a fantastic delivery, he's got some great lyricism to go along with it, and he's also one that is not afraid to just randomly drop everything in the middle of a track and kind of go his own path with the overall musical narrative. And that is definitely something to really aspire to enjoy in hip-hop these days, considering in a lot of the more popular vessels of hip-hop, you hear a very, very predetermined cycle, one that is kind of easy to pinpoint. You know, you have your standard verses and then chorus, and then verses and then chorus, and the whole thing can get a little bit monotonous. However, this is kind of similar to Kendrick Lamar in scope in the fact that he kind of just goes his own path with this and does with hip-hop as a god would do with a creation. Basically formulating it in the clay that's within his hands and shaping it the way that he wants it to be. So that definitely is a freeing idea, one that certainly seems to be gaining rise here in the past 5 to 7 years, but has been present within the hip-hop community for quite a long time, just not something that really broiled to the surface all of that often. You have to think about all of the trailblazers. Whenever they did it for the first time, that was also considered to be something wild and outrageous. Think about the first time you ever heard NWA or any sort of, gangster rap. That was certainly something that took a lot of people aback. You just have to think about the time frame in which that was released and realize that the whole entire country was in an uproar over it. But getting back to, I don't like shit, I don't go outside, at times, this disjointed narrative can feel a little bit overwhelming to a listener. It's certainly an experience that, for some that are very musically acclimated to things of this variety, and perhaps of those of a harder nature, this is a little bit easier to get into because disjointedness and kind of this detachment and non-linear narrative, so to speak, is very familiar ground. However, for those that are extremely familiar and extremely used to a very straightforward and linear narrative, one that does not have to take as many left and right turns in order to achieve its goal, this is an album that may seem a bit much. It's one that may seem to have just a little bit too much of that weird factor included within it in order for it to really break through the ice. But I think a lot of that's going to kind of be tempered by the fact that many people at this stage of the game checked out Doris, checked out Earl Sweatshirt's previous album, so they're very used to that style, and they heard just what the kind of potential that Earl had as both a wordsmith and also as a producer. So at this stage of the game, those folks that bought into Doris are certainly going to buy into this album. I don't see the Lil Wayne fans and, kind of the wayward rap fans really being a huge fan of this disc. I don't see how they could really get into something that does have a little bit of a reality mixed in with this very broken style of narrative. And for me, though, this is an extremely rewarding album based around the fact that it has darkness to it, and it's a different kind of darkness. Kind of like how Kendrick Lamar was able to present us a different side of the traditional G-rap story. We have Earl Sweatshirt giving us a different side of a mental struggle or a different side of life as a celebrity or life in general. One that really incorporates more of the mental status and more of just a detachment from life as opposed to one that is openly embracing partying and openly embracing all sorts of excess. Now, that's not to say that this album doesn't have any relation or any references to excess, because it certainly does, but it's one that seems to have that more as a metaphor for self-destruction as opposed to anything else. Overall, this album is a very interesting listen. It's one that I highly recommend that you listen to at least once to see if this is for you, because we need to listen to a little bit of everything in this musical world of ours, and we need to find the things that are best for us, the ones that will not feel like the mainstream, the ones that will not feel like the cookie cutter garbage that we seem to be fed ad nauseum here in 2015, especially in the pop market. I think that this is an album that many folks will enjoy, even if they're just on the fringe line of looking for something new and unique in rap music and perhaps didn't hear Doris by Earl Sweatshirt a couple of years ago. I'd probably give the album an 82 out of 100. I think it's a fair score. I enjoyed the album, however, I find myself going only back to choice and keynote tracks every so often, as opposed to with the Kendrick Lamar album, in which I was spinning it constantly over and over again in full. That's kind of the difference here. Even though this is a shorter album by Earl, I still feel that I can only really go back to those keynote tracks because they just mesmerized me, and it kind of overtakes the overall value of the entire narrative of the album. What did you guys think about this album? Are you shocked that it's out already? Is this something that is a shock to your system, or do you absolutely love this? A lot of you have been begging that I talk about the band Death Grips, and I think that that's finally going to happen. So instead of asking you what I should review next, I'm actually just going to tell you that we're going to be talking about Jenny Death from Death Grips next, whenever it comes to the hip-hop or the non-metal albums that I cover. And this is something that's becoming a little more prevalent on the channel because I have a little bit of time to do it, and because of the positive response that you guys have given to some of these reviews. I am very thankful for that. It just kind of adds another great thing that I can hopefully give to you guys, the listeners and the watchers. As of course, I thank you very much for watching this album review as well. Please subscribe and like, share this with all of your friends, add more people to the nation, and share great music. Definitely let people know about I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside by Earl Sweatshirt, and pick up a physical copy whenever it comes out in the middle of April. Thanks again. Have a good one.